Okay. All right. So hello and welcome to Capital City in Conversation, Edmonton's food scene. So glad to see you all here tonight as we have a pretty stellar panel here. And I know this is going to be a great discussion. My name is Kate Gibson. I'm the manager of the Strathcona branch of the Edmonton Public Library and the lead of Capital City Press, EPL's initiative to support and promote local writing. And I'm your moderator for tonight, so I'll be asking some questions and leading the conversation a bit. But you're not here to hear me talk. What you're here to hear are these people. So without further ado, with me here tonight, I have Mary Bailey, editor and founder of the Tomato Food and Drink magazine. I have Lindsay Porter, a chef and past competitor on Top Chef Canada. Kevin Kossowan, forager, hunter, outdoor food instructor, and producer of a web series. And last but not least, Patty Milligan, an agriculture education specialist with Urban Farm Edmonton. So welcome all.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you
for having me.
This is the one weird thing about doing this online. We can't, all clap. We can't see each other. Feel free to use reactions. There are reactions along the bottom of the screen, and just seeing those little reactions pop up can be really nice, actually. So as the title of the event notes, this is a conversation. I have some questions for you, some for the whole panel, some for you individually, but we'll see where the answers take us. And I'll make sure to leave time at the end for questions from the audience. So I ask that if you can put your questions in the chat box and I'll read them out and kind of organize them that way. But I'll try and make sure to get to them if we can, and hopefully we'll have a really, really good discussion. To get us started, though, I gave a very, very brief overview of who you are and how you're connected to food and why you're on this panel tonight. But I was just curious if you can kind of give a little bit more and also tell me, what does food mean to you? So I'm just going to go on order of my screen. Patty, who are you and what does food mean to you?
Sure. My name's Patty Milligan, and I have been many things in my life, including teacher, writer, editor, farmer's daughter, gardener, seed plant operator. So lots of things that have and have not been related to food. I think one of my entry points was, aside from my upbringing on a mixed cattle farm just northeast of Edmonton, was when I became a beekeeper in 1999, and that brought me into a world of local food, farmers markets. That's where I met Kevin many years ago. It's where I met Mary many years ago. From there, I ended up doing a lot of work in that realm, working with the city market when it was relocated to 104th Street, working with the Alberta Farmers Market Association, and really loved that energy, loved those people, and saw how hard people were working to connect with others through their product, through their storytelling. And I would say that for me, I gradually understood that I wanted to teach and talk more than actually produce. And perhaps that points to the thing that I love most about food. And food's many things, but if I had to say it was about one thing, it's about relationship. It's a way that we connect to people. It's a way that we share our stories, that we share skills, that we unite and build bridges between people, share skills. So I would say food for me is really about relationship.
Wonderful. Lindsay, do you want to jump off of there?
Yeah, so like what food means to me?
Who are you and what does food mean to you?
Yeah, okay. So I'm Lindsay Porter. I'm a chef in the city. I've been a chef in the city for many years. I've been able to work in a lot of amazing restaurants here, some catering restaurants, competed on a lot of like either television shows or just local competitions. Been very grateful to have had such a good career in Edmonton. But I think ultimately what food means personally to me is it's a way to take something that's sustenance, like the very, very basic form of something that you need, sustenance, and be able to transform that in a very creative, artistic way. So something that you need, and then turning that into something that you love and something that you want to create. So that's how I work as a chef. I mean, I'm sure there's a million other ways that people are going to interpret that, but I love to take something that I'm trained in, something that people ultimately need, turning it into something that they want, and then turning it into something creative and something valuable and something interesting and something that they crave rather than need. So yeah, that's food to me, is like trying to take something at the very base of what you need and turning it into something so much more. So yeah, that's me as a chef.
I agree with Patty, beautifully described. Mary, you were nodding along to that. Do you wanna introduce yourself and say what food you?
Well, my name is Mary Bailey. I publish the Tomato Food and Drink magazine, and I've been writing about food and drink, for that matter, particularly wine, for, I don't know, over a long time. Let's just put it at that, a few decades. And it's sustenance. Food is creativity. Those are two things that Lindsay certainly touched on, and also identity, which I think is what Patty was also talking about. She said it was relationship. I mean, you can talk with people. You may not share the same language, but if you're cooking together, or if you're eating together, or if you bond over a particular ingredient, you've made a connection. I don't know how many times I've stood in the lineup at the Italian Center, and there'll be a little old lady behind me with something, I don't even know what it is. And I'll just say to, what is it? And they'll talk for 10 minutes about how to cook it and what they do with it and that their kids like it. I mean, it's an ongoing conversation. I mean, that's probably my favorite thing about food. But I think also we need to remember food is so much part of our identity, and whether we're we're all immigrants, but particularly people who have just recently come to this country, sometimes they have a hard time finding the ingredients that they're really used to. And one of the things I love about what's happening in the Edmonton area is people are growing ingredients that Filipinos are comfortable with, South Asians are comfortable, Asian. I mean, it's so many things. I just get really excited thinking about it. It's not a meat and potatoes thing anymore at all. I could go on and on, so I'm just going to stop right there.
We'll have lots more chances to talk about this. Kevin, who are you and what does food mean to you?
Sorry, I muted my to be polite. And then I was impolite by having my muted mic. Food is like everything for to me, for all the reasons that people have mentioned. It's something we truly cannot live without, or we die. And then it leaps into that once you have the luxury of what the slow food movement is big on, with conviviality, and you're eating with your family and you're eating with your friends, and it transcends into like joyful things, and then you can get into profound connectivity with the farmers that are growing your food, or the ecosystem that provides your food. So for me, food is just kind of consumed my entire life, and so it's truly everything. I spend my time now doing one of two things. I'm mostly still in the production world, pointing cameras at food. I did a lot of that around the planet pre-COVID at agriculture and culinary, like that side of the industry. But also for a decade, I've been producing film, television around the wild food side of things. So foraging, hunting, fishing, and how that relates to, I guess, what the possibilities are in those places on the culinary side. So that's what I do for work. I also spend a lot of time now teaching people how to find plants and identify mushrooms and how to bring them into their home kitchen. So that's what I do.
Amazing. And I definitely will want to hear more about that. But I wanted to jump into maybe another question for all of you. And Mary, you kind of touched on this a little bit, so maybe I'll pass this question to you first. But how do you see food tied up in a city's identity? I mean, with Edmonton, we do have a lot of people coming from all over the world. So how does food create that particular city's identity? And, what is Edmonton starting to shape up to look like?
Well, I think food telegraphs what a city thinks of itself.
Mm.
It tells us, who it is, who lives there, what do they care about? I think that's really what food does in a city. And the wonderful things that we're seeing right now is this, lovely and fairly rapid influx of people coming who are now able to either grow their own ingredients or source their own ingredients or figure out how to make dishes that's beloved to them for either for their family or their culture, and how to do that with the ingredients that they find. I mean, I was over at my friend's Brad, and he hands me a potato. He says, "Oh, these are Ukrainian butter potatoes." And he had somebody, through somebody, 4 other people, one of those kind of potato chains, so I'm going to cut it up. I'm going to plant it. I'm going to have beautiful Ukrainian butter potatoes, which I didn't even know they existed. Then he says, yeah, and I've got some Polish tomatoes too. Here's a Polish tomato. So those sorts of things, I mean, there's nothing better than baba cooking. And to me, the best baba cooking is done with those sorts of ingredients.
Yeah. Patty, Lindsay, Kevin, do you guys have thoughts on what it is that, makes the city's identity and culture in food?
I mean, me personally, the first thing I do when I go to any city, any town, anything is obviously look up the restaurants, right? Like I love eating out. It doesn't matter if it's home cooking or if I'm looking for super like high end, super crazy kind of like just out of here food. I think you learn a lot from the city by what kind of like restaurants are like either trending or opening, or what's kind of hot in the city. And I think right now Edmonton has such a like unique scene that like so many places are opening, and like there's so many different cultures that are opening different restaurants but using like a lot of local ingredients. So to me, like it's just like the food for me is like the number one indicator of the culture of the city. And the more dynamic food scene, the more dynamic like genres and different kinds of stuff that's going on really leads me to believe like what's going on. And the more vibrant it is, like the more that I know that, oh, okay, like this is kind of a happening city, like there's things going on. When you're just kind of when you see a food scene just stagnant and it's just the same, and people are eating the same things over and over and over again, and the same places are busy, the same place, like nothing's happening. But I just know when you see new places opening, it makes me excited as a chef. And I know like I'm excited when I see different genres and I see different places that are opening. So yeah, it excites me as a chef. And
I definitely always do that. I always check out the restaurants and towns that I visit. And I do like to say, I'm not from Edmonton. I'm from basically the West Coast, the Lower Mainland. And growing up, you didn't hear much about Edmonton, I'm going to have to admit. But being here, whenever people come and visit, I say, check out our food scene because it rivals Vancouver's any day. There are so much cool things happening here. I always love to show it off. Patty or Kevin, do you have thoughts on how food is tied up with the city's identity and culture? Any thoughts on what that is for Edmonton?
Sure. I have lots of thoughts.
Okay.
I think also city's food scene is reflected in its regulations and its zoning practices and its land use. So who has access to land and who has the possibility of growing things, where and how businesses can be set up, who has access to those businesses. I think that also plays a part of it. And I think it's really interesting that even in the landscape, you see how food sort of projects itself, whether it's a random rhubarb in a back alley, or the asparagus in the hills of the river valley. You're almost like you have a map of the history of Edmonton mapped out in food. And so I do think there's sort of this concrete way that cities can build around food. I mean, look at places, meatpacking district, Haymarket. When you go to other cities, the actual neighborhoods reflect the history of food. So I do think it's important to, as we try to light that little flame that gives us a diverse and vibrant food scene, that those things also have to be taken into account. And I even think something like, food trucks or farmers markets or street food, or, the way that we allow or pass bylaws to prohibit or allow different food practices actually impacts the vibrancy of the food scene, and it also impacts who can access it.
Kevin.
May I add something to that?
Of course.
It's very, Patty, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I have written in my notes here something that I forgot to say, but landlords. So for many, many years, landlords really wouldn't rent to an independent restaurateur. It was chain all the way, because that felt safe. Investors wouldn't invest in an independent restaurant because it didn't feel safe. And restaurateurs left the city. Cam Dabransky, wonderful Edmonton raised chef, very successful in Calgary. He left because he was frustrated with what he couldn't do here. Now, I'm happy to say that's changing. It started to change around 2015, 2016. We had some really smart, wonderful Edmonton-based developers who realized, like, oh, this doesn't go. I'm going to mention one of them, Belgian Developments. They've done amazing things with primarily independents. But now there's people coming in, the citizen group, they're coming in, I think, from Toronto. They are open to encouraging independence, because without independence, you don't have a food scene. Chains do not make a food scene at all. So what Patty was saying about bylaws and this and that ties right into really who controls the money. And when the money is available to primarily young independent chefs and people who want to open interesting restaurants and interesting food halls and interesting anything, it makes a huge difference.
Good point. Kevin, I wanted to give you a chance to weigh on this. I don't know if you're coming at it from a different angle, but any thoughts?
No, I think everyone in the room here on the panel knows how far this city has come in the last 10, 20 years. And I would agree with Mary that a large portion of that is because we have a really cool community of independent restaurateurs in the culinary space, and a lot of entrepreneurs making really cool food products, and people at farmers markets making cool stuff. And that seems like, well, that's everywhere, and it is, but there are a lot of other cities, and I'm not going to throw any under the bus, but there's a lot of other cities where a lot of the top restaurants are owned by conglomerated corporations. And the food scene here is just not built that way. It's a lot more grassroots here, and I'm really proud of that. And anytime someone asks about the Edmonton food scene, that's what I big up. It's just a bunch of really cool people. A lot of us are just all friends, and with really odd, innovative concepts that are doing fun, innovative things in food. And I'm really proud of that. That's one of the things I like most about this place and living here with regards to food.
Wonderful. Mary, so I mean, you mentioned you've been in the publishing world for food and drink for a while, and I mean, you kind of talked about this a little bit, but first of all, what was the publishing world like when you started? Was there an interest in food like there is now in Edmonton? Were people like quick to be like, yes, we need this magazine, or was it a hard sell at first?
Well, no one knew what it was. I mean, because we didn't have any food magazines. It was sort of something that might get covered off. The Journal had a great column. Judy Schultz wrote a great column for so many years. But there was a magazine in Calgary called The City Palette, and I really liked it. And I thought, that's really cool. I want to bring that to Edmonton. And the reason was because we knew what was happening in Vancouver. We knew what was happening in New York City. We knew what was happening in Toronto. Nobody knew what was happening in Edmonton. And I knew there was cool things happening. I mean, it was nascent, but it was definitely starting. And you have to have, the food scene is a very big thing. It's farmers, it's entrepreneurs, it's chefs, it's people who enjoy good food. And it's a little bit, if you build it, they will come, is kind of what I was working with. I mean, I started on a wing and a prayer, and 28 years later, we're still kind of lurching from one issue to the next. But basically it's a way to find out what's going on. And certainly there's lots of voices now. There were very few voices then, and they were pretty corporate, but now there's tons of voices, people who are talking about the food scene. Some do it really, really well. Some do it, maybe in a different way, but there's lots to talk about. And of course, social media, everybody's on Instagram, taking pictures of food or posting pictures of food and saying, oh, this is what I ate last night or whatever. And, that's a whole nother game. So it's very exciting. It's been a fun ride. It's very exciting, and I'm not finished yet, so we got a ways to go yet.
And the rest of you, please feel free to jump in and comment. I know Patty said Mary helped create the food scene, and Laura mentions that she thinks she has 15 years of back issues of the City Palette. So.
Oh, I'm really happy to hear that. Yeah, we changed the name in 2010. We just wanted to refresh, so we, called it the Tomato. But back in those days, like 1996. I mean, some of you were so young you don't remember that, but we had one farmers market. The city market had closed. We only had the Strathcona market. That was it. Most of the chefs were from Switzerland. So so much has changed. And yes, food has become a big deal in a lot of places, but Edmonton maybe was a little slow to adopt it. Patty, I remember when Judy and I were writing that first book, that's when I first met you. And we went out to your farm and learned all about bees from you. And that, because to us, the farmers were as important as anything that was being made in a restaurant kitchen. And we really felt those two things hadn't quite got together yet. So we've seen a big change there. There's so many more farmers who are working directly with restaurants, so many more chefs who are working directly with farmers. I mean, it's really, really beautiful to see, because to me, that's the basis of a food scene, is good ingredients, and ingredients from close, not from, another country. I mean, some things come from olive oil. We can't live without good olive oil, but there's a lot of great things that are being grown in Alberta, and I'm just so happy to be able to have them on the plate every day.
Yeah.
Is that what you asked me? Did I
No,
answer
totally.
I'm not really sure.
I said, this is a conversation. It's wherever we take it. And I was curious, my next question, kind of jumping off of that, was how has it changed since it first started? And you kind of talked about that a bit, but I'm curious, just as you say, how much has changed. Have you all seen this change? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely.
Especially like the, farm to table, the local ingredients thing. I'm curious your thoughts on all your thoughts on that.
I would say there's a lot of things that happened that we just couldn't have imagined. And I think when we look at the or not upsurge, just surge in number of farmers markets, well, there had to be a surge in number of farmers to fill them. So I remember thinking, oh, is there a young farmer around here? Like, or beekeepers meetings. I would go to the beekeepers meeting, and I was in my early 30s. I was by like decades the youngest person there, and that's not the case now. So you find young people, you find lots of women, you're finding people of color, you're finding First Nations people who weren't visible in those scenes 20 years ago, and are producing foods that are unique and interesting and culturally specific, and that really excites me. You wouldn't have seen that 10, 20 years ago.
And second and third generation now too, which is really lovely to see, because there is a future in farming. I mean, it's not an easy future, but there is future in farming.
Kevin, do you have something to, again, you're in the foraging and all that. Have you seen this change? Is there an upsurge in people interested in foraging and hunting as well?
Well, I think some context for people that don't know me, I think my entire career was built off the back of the local food movement. That's basically what got me launched into the entire world of food, which, like I said, is kind of an all-consuming one. And everything's changed, like all the things that has already been said, the number of farmers markets. It's funny, Patty, you nailed it. When we were early on, when I got involved with the slow food folks, everything that anyone kind of had on their wish list as to, oh man, I sure wish we had that in our city. You fast forward 10, 15 years and I kind of have it, which is pretty amazing. And to the extent that I'm hanging out with the peers going, holy, how did this happen? Like, and I think part of the answer is you had a whole lot of good people, and Mary, you were the, you know, some of the first people going, okay, well, we're going to make this better. And I think that's fundamentally it, from the Duchess Bake Shop folks wanting to make things better, to my buddy Blair opening a butcher shop here and trying to make things better with connectivity to farms. And everyone just kept stepping the game up until the game was really damn good. So the scene has changed a ton. Is there an uptick in foraging? I wouldn't be teaching it if people didn't want to learn it. So yeah, that's changed too. And I think that's a natural extension of once you understand agriculture and what ingredients are around you, and you understand how to source those things that you would find at a farmer's market, some of the ingredients that get rather peculiar and interesting are the ones that actually just grow in our ecosystems without our intervention, without agriculture. And that's what I've been spending my time. Yeah, yeah, you bet out east. Ramps are super popular. Today I was picking morels and cattails and what else? Labrador tea and black currant leaves, and dropping them off at the kitchen at Range Road for a dinner tomorrow. That wasn't really there was not a lot of interest in that prior. I'm teaching almost every weekend through the entire summer, connecting people through to again, it's not so much about like wild food as in like, I'm going to teach you how to fish or hunt. I don't teach that at all. It's really trying to help people understand that we already get a lot of food from something like trees and through the form of maple syrup and other things, all the way down to stuff underground in the forests and in every ecosystem that is around us. I'm just trying to connect people to that piece of it now.
Lindsay, sort of on the restaurant side of things, yeah, are you seeing all of everything everyone's talking about, you know, coming from that side of things?
Yeah, so starting off when I was just starting off in my career, I mean, I was working in hotels, and it would just be ordering what you could to make anything look beautiful. I remember ordering, like, it was ridiculous. Like, you'd order in orchids, and it's beautiful, but so wasteful, so expensive. So I think, like, from where I've come, and I just like, even like just deep inside, like even back then, I was just like, man, this thing just, it doesn't seem right. Why am there's I can do this in such a better way. And just over the years, like, just what the farmers have been able to provide for me. So I've been off for just a little bit, and I've gotten very heavily into gardening myself. I like have a huge lot in my backyard, and I was like, okay, well, every single thing that I've ever wanted to, like, make a plate beautiful, make it delicious. I don't want to just like take something for the aesthetics of it. I always want to like utilize something in the best way. Like, I grow lemon balm now. I have borage growing in my backyard. I have borage for the bees to pollinate, like, so much stuff. And I just think that myself, as like just starting off as a chef, or I shouldn't even say a chef, starting off as a cook, and then you go to school, you just learn how to do your basic training, but taking that and taking your knowledge of cooking, and then you start to think about things and sustainability and how to utilize things in so many different ways. So I would never, like, it doesn't even occur in my brain again to like use an orchid for a garnish. I would rather use like a locally grown marigold, or I would rather, like, you know, like something that's locally grown and something you can utilize in so many different ways. Like, I grow lovage back there, and like I use that in stocks now, and I'm kind of like doing a little bit more independent work, but I'm thinking about what's locally grown here and what I can actually grow. Like, I've learned about the cooking aspect of it, and I'm taking the cooking aspect of it, and now I'm kind of like flipping it and like seeing like the growing aspect of it. And like, I'm wowed every single day about seeds and how to utilize like so much more of a plant or an herb than I ever than I ever thought. So combining those two elements for me has just been like, oh, like I've learned so much in probably like the past 2 years than I have in the last probably 10 or 12, because it humbles you to know, like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. I had no idea this grew, and I had no idea I could use the flowers. I had no idea I could use the seeds. I had no idea I could use the stems, the roots of one plant. And like I'm such a fool. Like the waste that I've been wasting like the past couple of years because I just didn't have the knowledge of it. I was just simply based on like, like a simple recipe. But yeah, the last couple of years has been really eye-opening for me, and learning about like things that are grown here and how to utilize them in different ways. So yeah.
Awesome.
That's what I have to say.
Wow. Don't call yourself an idiot, please. I am
No, like not like when you look at yourself, you're like, oh my God, I could have saved myself so much money.
But I mean, it made me think, like, I'm sure a lot
Yeah.
of like chefs training schools and stuff like that are very probably standardized, probably very, Western
and rightfully so. Like they teach people to cook, but once you get beyond that, like you start to realize like the vast knowledge beyond that. You can work with people who know plants and just so much beyond, and then you're just like it really does open up your mind to like what you've been missing out on, how to and what I've learned with working with different people throughout the years is like they don't know, like they don't know how to utilize it in cooking, and then I don't know how to utilize it. So it's nice to work with different people in different scenarios where they never thought of using the seeds to dill seed is just like a very generic thing, but like they wouldn't think to use it in a steak, and vice versa. Like that's like a very generic thing, but it's interesting to work with people who know what's edible, and then you can take what's edible and then utilize it in a cooking process. And then I've just found it very rewarding to work with different people and to teach me how to use different ingredients in various ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you're super excited about it. And I have a question. How do you use lovage stalks? Because I have a ton of lovage in my backyard. It grows like I planted it and it just keeps coming.
Crazy. I know. And I just planted a whole bunch too. So now I'm just like, I think I planted just
soup. Is it like, how do you use it? Sorry, I'm curious.
Oh man, like me personally, I find like my flavor, I find it tastes like kind of like curried, like slightly curry celery. So
yeah, I
like
can see that.
Yeah. So like I'll make like instead of like celery soup, I'll use like lovage. Because celery is kind of, I've found it hard to grow. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know. Every celery that I've grown in my backyard has just like never worked. Lovage seems to. So
I do nothing in my lovage grows. So yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? It's so easy. I use it in stocks. I use it in curries. I use it just.
This is brilliant. You're talking about this right now. It's like I had no idea.
I know, like a lot of people don't know how to use lovage, but think of it. Yeah, like me personally, I just find it like kind of a curried celery. So you can chop it up, use it.
I'm gonna jump in.
Yes.
That is a plant that needs you to understand seasonality too.
Oh yeah.
The little sprouts in the spring are kind of when sorrel's coming up and rhubarb, like right now. They're awesome, just raw, because they don't have that really punch you in the head kind of thing from lovage. So that's the window to eat this stuff and really enjoy the heck out of it. And honestly, then I just ignore my lovage for the rest of the year because there's something else is in season like every week. So that's one thing I preach a lot too. There's something in season every week of the year. You just gotta learn the ways. And lovage is one of those that we really enjoy for a short period of time.
Yeah.
Well, I put it in salads. I put it in
it's
salad
so good
all the
when it's
time.
young.
Like like just all the herbs, like there'll be the arugula comes on really fast. You know, you've got little baby lettuce, you've got spring onion, you've got lovage. I just chop it all up, throw the parsley in there, parsley stems too, just chop, chop, chop. You know, with a fairly robust dressing, it just tastes amazing. And, you know, some little slivers of radishes, asparagus now, because it's asparagus season, that makes a beautiful salad. I like
Nice.
lovage and asparagus together.
I grew like a ton I'm growing like snap peas and like little
Oh,
peas.
yeah.
They're sweeter, right? So if you mix the lovage and
Yeah.
snap peas
And the
together,
pea shoots.
so
The pea
yeah,
shoots
and
are so
it's
delicious.
so delicious because it's like kind of sweet and then like a
Yeah.
little bitter celery taste. I don't know if it's celery that you want to describe it as. That's how I find it, but yeah, I find snappies and lovage go really well.
Mm.
So
together.
It's
well
also a
together.
great
That's
name.
nice.
Lovage is a great name too. It's just got a great name.
Oh, yeah.
My sister, so funny story. So her and her partner moved to Calgary and bought a house, and they had like this huge lovage plant underneath this tree, and she had no idea what it was, but this person named it, and it was or I think she looked it up, and she called me. She's like, I have this plant. She's like, lavage. I was like, oh, lavage.
Plant it next to the borage.
Yeah, just like, oh, it's so exotic.
You know who grows really outstanding celery is Sundog.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
So I've been getting their CSA for years, but they're at the farmers, the Strathcona Farmers Market.
Yeah.
Their celery is unbelievable. Dark green, so delicious. It's like, oh, so this is what celery tastes like. It's
Mm.
just amazing. Because I have the same problem. I've never been able to grow it. It needs so much water.
Yeah.
I've
And you're
never-
right, they grow good everything.
Oh,
Props
well,
to
yeah.
Sundog.
But it's
Some
you know,
good
this is-
people.
not everybody has celery, and they have celery. It's just because it's tough to grow. It's tough to grow well. But oh yeah, theirs is so good.
I'll have to try it because I have to admit, celery that you get like in the supermarket,
Oh,
I'm
Sure.
not sure the point of it, honestly, so I don't buy it.
Mhm.
oh no,
So-
it'll blow your mind. You'll be like,
Okay.
oh,
Where is it?
celery.
Sorry, I missed that.
Sundog,
Sundog. Okay.
Yeah. Strathcona Market.
Yeah.
It's not too late to sign up for the CSA. I'm going to give them a little plug because their CSA is spectacular. Even with the vegetable garden, it's still spectacular.
Awesome. I do want to talk a little bit about Edmonton Urban Farms, since we're talking about gardening and all that. So, I mean,
Let me
to start with,
just-
people might not know what this is. So, Patty, did you want to give a brief sort of rundown of what it is?
Sure, I would love to. So the Edmonton Urban Farm is started as a 1 acre little urban farm in central Edmonton, just west of Borden Park, and Kevin was a part of that. For 4 years, it was a actual commercial venture run by Laktuka Farms, growing exotic greens for farmers markets and for restaurants. And then Travis stepped away, and it kind of shifted. The idea was, and this was Jesse Radis's brainchild, the idea was that if you could show that this economic model works, and then you can use that for your educational programs. So there's been education happening there since 2014. The economic model shifted. Now it's more like a community garden. So we actually, and then we expanded in 2021. So it's quite an amazing place. We partner with organizations as opposed to individuals. So shout out to Milk Thistle Farm. Pam McKinnon Coco is on this call, and she's one of our key farmers in that group. And we also partner with Edmonton Mennonite Center for Newcomers, Multicultural Health Brokers, Syncunia Community Development Organization. We have Student Association of McEwen, Wild Outside. I'll for sure miss people, but lots of really amazing organizations who have their plots and do what they want. They're really gardening for their own community and for their own needs, and they know that the garden is going to be filled with mainly kids who are learning about food and farming in the city. So actually our urban farm school kicked off today. So we had 94 kindergartens from Our Lady of of the Prairies School out in Collingwood. And then actually I was really excited about this because I think it's our furthest away school we've ever had. And we don't often get high school students, but we had 14 high school students from Hilltop High School in Whitecourt. So they have an urban farming club or class. And those kids, I guess the physics kids were going somewhere. So those kids came along. And so they also hung out at the farm. So we're now under that. We started out under Northlands. So the agricultural focus was kind of clear because Northlands was an ag society. We're now under the auspices of Explore Edmonton. So there's a moment of like, oh, like, why would a tourism and hospitality organization run a farm? But I'm really happy to say they're all in. They've really embraced owning a farm. They've really given support to us, made it clear that they understand. I mean, they're about vibrant cities. And I have to say that they're, independent restaurants are one way of creating a vibrant city. Community gardens are another way. Farmers markets are another way. Food trucks are another way. So vibrant community gardens really do contribute to a city, to the, it allows people to access space. It allows people to come and relax. All those mental and social and physical health benefits just bubble up in a garden on top of the food. So let me think. One of the things we realized when we joined Explore Edmonton in 2021 is that we wanted to be, we would host occasional tours for the general public. And we realized, no, if we're, we want to align with them as well. So we are open every Saturday between Victoria Day weekend and Thanksgiving from 10 to 4. We have ongoing garden tours. We have music, we have arts, we have talks. So in the back of my mind, I'm like booking Lindsay, booking Mary, booking Kevin. So yeah, we're really we're a hub now, and we have lots of things going on, which are both sort of learning, sharing skills. And then we also have, hey, it's cool to just hang out at a community garden. It's possible to create a vibrant space in the city. And honestly, we have so many cultures represented there. I think we counted last year and we had 25 different languages spoken there.
Wow.
And also the diversity of the farmers is reflected in the diversity of the plants. So we have these gardeners like milk thistle are planting artichokes and trombone squash from Italy. And these gardeners are growing 3 different kinds of bok choy. And these gardeners are growing callaloo, and these are growing sweet potato. And we're all learning a lot and sharing. And it's a pretty cool thing happening there. So please come. We have chickens, we have hens, we have, chickens are hens, we have hens, we have rabbits, we have bees, we have worm compost. So lots of fun things for kids to learn and experience.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Kevin, you had answered in the chat, but did you want to talk a little bit about this? The question that came in was, what sort of thing did you think you would want at the beginning that has now come to fruition? Did you want to kind of recap or expand on your answer in the chat?
Yeah, I can recap. I mean, early on, I remember thinking, like, wouldn't it be nice to have more than one farmer's market? Like, maybe, and then that happened. And like Patty referred to, like, it took some inspiration and some farmers to like wanted to do the work and do cool projects related to food to fill all those gaps. I don't know, we could use a really sweet patisserie before the Duchess opened, and then they did, and then we still have, I would say, a shortage of independent butcher shops, and are having kind of a boom in opening of butcher shops lately. So all these kind of corners that make like Lindsay was saying earlier, just kind of make a city exciting and interesting on the food side, a place that you want to go visit. If it's interesting to someone from a different city, it's interesting to us. But all of those things didn't exist, or I shouldn't say not all of them, but we had a major bolstering of all of those little corners of the food scene. And then the hens thing is a perfect example of something that I was advocating for years. It took a lot of time. It took like a half a
Yeah.
decade before we
Yeah.
actually were able to see that change. And now we actually can. I have had hens for almost a decade now. That was totally offside back in the day, as was having bees. And even
Bees, yeah.
honestly, my yard is a forest garden. It's a hot mess of food. And that was even like the city wasn't sure back then. And all these things are just like they've just all been normalized, which is it's one of the greatest victories I've ever witnessed in my life, is watching the local food movement. All of these victories just get to be normal. It's just normal now to have lots of options for farmers markets and lots of cool farmers around and lots of cool restaurants to go to. And it's great. It's exactly I would say what we have now is exactly what we were hoping for, trying to make happen 10, 15 years ago when I got involved.
Bees and hens took way too long,
Yeah.
which is amazing. I want to mention a garden that I'm not sure if a lot of people know about, but that's the Green and Gold Garden. So it's sort of a hybrid, because it really is a community garden. It's completely staffed by volunteers. It's on the university farm, so just sort of southeast. And everything they do, they raise money for a group called Tumor Mirais in Rwanda. So it's been going now for about 20 years, and it is extraordinary. It's an absolutely wonderful garden. It's only open Saturdays, I think, from like 9 to noon or something like that. And yes, you pay for your vegetables, and you pay market price. And it took them a long time to come to that, because at first they were pay what you can, but people were going away with armloads of vegetables and like throwing them $5 or a couple loonies, and it wasn't really fair. And they don't want to compete with farmers markets, so they said, no, we want our prices to be similar to a farmer's market. But I have to tell you, it's an absolutely stunning place. It's just beautiful to go out there. Now, since the pandemic, you used to be able to walk around and go sort of pick yourself or have a picker. Now, I don't know if they're going to go back to that, because they stopped doing that during the pandemic, and kind of now you just get it here. But it's still a very special place. You can get like flowers, some lovely flowers for $10. It's really lovely. So if anybody hasn't been there, I highly recommend you go check it.
Very cool. Thank you.
Green and Gold.
Very neat. I am kind of cognizant of the time, but I am curious. I want to talk a little bit. You mentioned COVID. Obviously, the past 3 years have been a funny time for everyone. How did that impact kind of the food scene? Was there a pause? Did things change in different ways than you expected?
Well, there was good and bad. Sorry, I'm just going to jump in here.
Do please.
So it was tough for restaurants, very tough for restaurants. And a lot of it had to do with who your landlord was. And a lot of restaurants had to learn some new things, and had to learn how to do takeout, and had to learn online ordering, and to a mix kind of yes and no in terms of how that worked for people. Some restaurants closed, mainly because they didn't have a landlord that was prepared to work with them. But one thing the pandemic did do is that it really introduced the concept of seasonality to an awful lot of people. I mean, we've been talking about seasonality from, for years. I mean, we've always, all of our recipes are seasonal, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, Kevin's mentioned it too. Seasonality is so important, but people kind of weren't getting it. They still wanted to get their pears in January, and their asparagus in December for Christmas dinner, and their peaches in February. And, that's just, it's not sustainable. And that's what we found out during the pandemic, that just didn't work anymore. So you found people, starting to garden, starting to make their own gardens, even in a window box. They were trying to figure out, well, what do I buy and how do I do this? And they were finding that local food systems were still fairly robust, and they could still buy potatoes and beets. And I remember when there was no flour anywhere, the Italian Center had their big 20K bags of flour available for sale, because nobody else had any, so I think it really helped people understand what a sustainable food system actually looks like. And that is a system that is seasonal, because if you have to ship a carrot or a pear or an artichoke all around the world, that doesn't really work. So but you have to learn, I'm going to grow my own strawberries, or I'm going to buy them somewhere and buy a flat and freeze them myself so I can have strawberries in January. I'm not going to go and buy a thing of strawberries for $10 in January, because it doesn't really make any sense.
Well, and that's something that I've learned as well. I mean, I did have a restaurant. We closed during the pandemic. I have taken a lot of time to learn about what to grow and how to preserve it. I made kimchi from, I mean, we grew zucchini, and everybody knows like how much zucchini you have at the end of the season. So oh yeah, here, he's passing it to me right now. He's on Adam's on the other side. Like I have 12 of these still. Like, yeah, like you kind of learn to adapt and okay, well, how am I going to take something from the summer and make it last throughout the winter? And that's exactly what you're almost forced to do, because I don't want to pay the prices at the grocery store for, I don't want to pay $12 for a head of cabbage, when I can grow it myself in the summer and pick zucchini and do it in the same way. I turned it into kimchi, and you're almost like forced to teach yourself a different way of living. And especially now I'm kind of doing a little more independent work and a little bit more independent, either catering or cooking, etc. I think about what I grow. I started thinking about it like back in February, like what do I want to grow to be able to sustain myself as like an independent contractor, independent cook throughout the summer, and what am I going to also grow in my yard that is going to last me throughout the fall and winter, that's a little bit less expensive. And yeah, you are forced to learn different things, and that's something that I've had to learn. I mean, I knew how to do it in a restaurant setting, but it was never a necessity, and now I almost find like it is. And yeah, like I was like, oh, what do I like? Okay, like what do I mostly use in like a lot of my cooking techniques? And so I've started to grow all that. And what do I want to garnish? What do I want to use? That's not going to, so I don't have to go to the grocery store and buy it for 10 times the price for what I can grow. So
I'm sort of imagining a plate of your food, Lindsay, and it's sort of floating off and landing in a spot in your garden, you know, where it's being grown,
like,
you know.
I often look at things too, like, okay, well, I've never grown, I haven't grown lovage before. I mean, I know it's such a typical thing and it grows so well, but I haven't. So now I'm using it in so many different recipes. Lemon balm, yeah, the borage flowers, like I'm growing those now. I'm purposely growing a lot more zucchini and a lot more squash because I can turn it into, I made zucchini sauerkraut. I made zucchini kimchi, and I'm using like the dill seeds that I grew along with the fresh dill. I'm turning that into things that I normally probably just would have purchased, made, and like not even like think about, or just purchased from some like a vendor, like a local vendor. But I feel myself that I've throughout this whole process, I've been forced and blessed to have been able to learn how to do it, and it's worked out fantastically. We're eating it tonight.
It makes you look at the season differently, right?
Yeah, and like how to preserve it, like crab apples, like you can preserve crab apples, you can preserve like our neighbors, we have an apple tree we planted a couple years. It's not given us apples yet, but we get apples from our neighbors, and now we're turning it into, we make our own cider here, we make our own, and this is just something we've just dabbled in ourselves at home, but it really opens up your eyes as to like how much you can actually preserve something like in a certain season and like take it throughout the year. Yeah,
Great. I also wanted to just ask if people want to start putting in questions, if you have any questions in the chat, please do. I'm gonna ask another question to the group while I'm waiting for anyone to write anything. And I'm gonna start with Kevin. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, Kate. I just wanted to mention, just because it relates to the impact of COVID, on at the Edmonton Urban Farm, it certainly helped us see the value of outdoor, safe, public urban spaces. Because for many of our farmers, you couldn't go anywhere, and some did not have access to private outdoor spaces. And so it really became a sanctuary for many of our gardeners. And, you know, if you can't go places, but you can go to this green space outdoors, it does make you look at a city differently, for sure.
It totally does. Yeah, it's very true. And I'm kind of curious, and this kind of leads into my next question, which again, I'm going to start with Kevin just because of how you answered the question in chat already. What is the future of food here in Edmonton? 10 years down the line, what would you like? We're at this place now that's amazing, but what more could be done? How do you see things changing? Where could we go from here? Just throw a lot at you, only because you had done the wishes. But anyone else wants to jump in first, of course, that I thought.
I mean, honestly, if we achieve just a more robust version of what we've already developed, I'd be very happy with that, and that's great. My ultra biased opinion is that I think we're still completely blind to the species that grow within the ecosystems around us, and that we live on top of it. We're in a city that's plopped in the aspen parkland. The boreal forest has all kinds of species, and I mean, it's just not, we don't have a cultural lens to it yet. It's not, if you go to the coast, you can eat Dungeness crab and you might find seaweed on a menu. Here, you'll find zero that has to do with the actual ecosystem we live in. We've got lots of agriculture and cool producers, but on a restaurant, me delivering to the restaurant for tomorrow, that's like very unusual. That's not culturally normalized. I'm assuming that since I teach so many people in a year, that maybe in 10 years you see more of people looking for morels right now because they're up. Maybe you find people making more like spruce tip sodas and Labrador tea, iced tea, and cocktails from wild things. Maybe. I would hope we get there, but I don't know that I'll see it. Maybe. That's a maybe.
It's fascinating. And again, like, people can take lessons from you, and they are taking lessons from you. I think that's great. Like, I know nothing about any of that. I am always terrified of mushrooms because I don't know.
And it's the thing, and there's other cultures that where it's interesting, because if I have a guest from the Czech Republic or from the Ukraine or a lot of Eastern Europe, they know this stuff.
Yeah.
Period. They know this stuff. And they can come into a different part of the planet and know this stuff. I would say as a culture in Edmonton, we're just really, it's just a big blind spot.
Patty points out there are First Nation restaurants exist that we didn't see 10 to 20 years ago, chefs, groups, etc. It's very true. I own, I can't see it. I have so many cookbooks around here, but I think it's Tawau. It was a recipe book. I have to admit, I haven't tried anything yet from there. They seem a bit intimidating to me,
but Shane Chartrand's.
Actually,
I have it here.
Yeah, I know I have it somewhere. I'm in my kitchen too, and I'm but yes, there is I would say, even from the time I've moved here, there it is. I mean, to me, it's quite fancy food. Partly why I haven't tried it yet. But he talks sort of about
this one.
Yeah, all of us have it.
Yeah, of course we do.
I've got it too. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I would say even in the 13 years that I've been here in Edmonton, things have changed in that route as well. Boreal Feast.
It's a wonderful cookbook. It's called The Boreal Feast. A culinary journey through the north. It's absolutely stupendous, and I have to say, Kevin, it ties right into what you were talking about. It's been out.
Yeah, you bet. I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's been out for a couple of years now. It's really quite spectacular. And this is a book. This is more for people, let's say, who are kind of trying to figure out what seasonality means and what it means in Alberta. And this book just came out recently. It's called Eat Alberta First. It's by a Calgary cookbook author, Karen Anderson. I highly recommend it for people, particularly who are just sort of starting to try to figure that out. And she does a really, really wonderful job of kind of explaining seasonality, explaining what grows in Alberta. She doesn't touch too much on what you can forage. And I think that is, as Kevin says, it is a bit of a blind spot. But, you know, I find there's a lot of Eastern Europeans in my neighborhood, and I'll come home and somebody's just taken all the yarrow that grows by my garage because they're going to go home and make tea. You know, I use the dandelions. Because I don't spray, so I make salad out of them. So I think it's an education thing. And it's also, people don't get out into wild spaces very often. So, you know, they're kind of like, ooh, I can eat that. You know, it's a whole new thing, right? Burdock. You can eat burdock. Who knew that? You know, it's just interesting.
Every
things.
Korean ever knew
Yeah.
that.
But it's not here. That's for sure. Like I know,
You
yeah.
can buy it at the grocery store, burdock. You can buy it at H Mart and most of the Chinese supermarkets in Chinatown. It's called gobo often, but Koreans make maki rolls out of the stuff, and it's actually a problematic weed in the river valley, and it's a root vegetable, and it's
so we should
free,
eat
and
it.
it's just sitting
So let's
there.
dig it all up.
You know what
I love burdock,
the Asian name for burdock, which I don't know, but I remember we did a foraging years and years ago, a slow food thing I set up. And a woman said, you know, the Chinese name means where the plow goes. So burdock follows where people go. That's all about, and I thought that's so interesting, where the plow goes. I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, we could certainly do a lot more around wild foods or things in our yard. I know I taste every weed that comes up that I don't know what it is. I taste it. You know, what's that? Could be a salad leaf.
Wow. I need to be more adventurous. It's just that lack of education. I go for a walk in the river valley, or I live near Mill Creek Ravine, and I'm like, I don't know what things are, and so I don't want to just try.
Well, I wouldn't, anywhere. Well,
The good news for you is 10 years in, I can tell you that most of what you see is edible and or can be turned into something really cool. Very little of it is problematically toxic or disgusting. And generally speaking, like most plants, if it's too bitter or too sour or whatever, it's kind of that's a culinary problem on how to balance that. It's not that the plant's bad. An example would be choke cherry, kind of awful if you just eat it, but it makes a really good whiskey sour, and it's really good on waffles. So like you just need to take that first step of understanding that most of that is food.
Yeah. And I think people probably these days need a little bit more knowledge on utilize any ingredient to so many degrees. Like you can roast it, use a stock with it. Like I think just using it, people are so used to just having something in one form and not taking it any further. So I think, like giving people the knowledge of how to take an ingredient and how to utilize different things in different ways, like choke cherries, like you said.
Lindsay, I'm going to interrupt. Sorry, you nailed something that I teach every week. It's I say that I accuse people of the exact same thing of we're really good at taking raspberries and making raspberry jam.
Yeah,
that's what I grew up doing. But never did it go into a vinaigrette on it. Like never did it make a savory dish, and never was it in a drink. We never had raspberry lemonade or something like that. And so on my walks, I'm constantly, every ingredient we encounter, it's how can you put that into a savory dish? Usually have to explain what that means. How can you put that into the pastry kitchen or dessert? And how can you put that into a drink? And that's I'm finding that really helpful because it gets people to think past that. Oh, I like strawberries. I eat them this one way.
I'll have strawberries and cream. Like you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're
and
so right.
having to think more layers.
And like how can you utilize like just anything in like different ways, like just a simple, like you have a clove of garlic. You don't just use it as garlic. Roast the garlic in oil. Use the oil to saute something else. Use the leftover like skins, make a garlic stock. Like there's so many ways to like teach people how to use one ingredient. And you're so right. Like how to use it in a savory dish, how to use it instead of just at its very base, because they eat it and it's like, I don't like this. Well,
Mhm.
you might like it if you cook it down, and yeah, you're so right. Like, I think
You know, you're
And then it
talking,
gets more complicated because then there's raspberry leaf tea that is, you can actually buy it in a superstore. Why? For health reasons and because it tastes good. And there's on and on and on. Roses, I try to get people to really embrace rose petals because it's a thing. And culturally, there's lots of other cultures in the world that can use rose water or rose as a flavor. And having grown up kind of French Ukrainian, we didn't eat that ever. But then you can also take the rose wood and make traditional archery equipment and arrows out of that, or fishing rods. Like there's also the utility side of that. It's a deep topic, but I love that topic of how many ways can you use the one thing.
yeah,
you
and
know,
like
you're talking,
how much, yeah, like how much can you get out of
yeah.
I'd like to
one
mention,
item, and how much can I extract
Yeah.
from it?
because
You
And
got
I'm
us all
talking
excited.
about
Wait.
that.
yeah, one of the things
That comes with sustainability too, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Just
I think
to
it also comes with cultural awareness, right? Because sometimes too, like we need to listen and learn. And one of the things that we've discovered at the Urban Farm, it's not new to many other people in the world, it was new to me, is that many cuisines eat pumpkin leaves. So we are familiar with flowers. I mean, they're not that common. They're a bit shishi. Many countries eat the pumpkin flower, but many countries eat the leaf. So one of our groups had arrived a little bit late last year because our expansion came in a little bit late, and they went to plant pumpkins, and it was late June. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh, I hate to tell them like they're not going to get pumpkins. Well, they didn't want pumpkins, they wanted the leaves. So you know, so now we have some gardeners who are growing pumpkins for pumpkins, and some gardeners who like to use the leaves. So then you can say, hey, can I take some of your leaves? So yeah, so I think it's about listening too, and finding out what people from many different cultures and traditions also use plants for.
You know, it's very much about cultural things, but it's also about Nona cooking or Baba cooking. It's cooking the way our great grandmothers and fathers cooked, where they kind of used everything. We've lost a lot of that knowledge, and especially I think in the sort of modern culture. So you know, to think about these things that people used to do, like making syrups, like making rose water, like doing things with the pumpkin leaves. I mean, that's very exciting, and it's so it's really fun too. So I think that's something we need to be thinking about. What did our great grandmothers do with that ingredient?
Yeah.
and like I always think, like when I'm using something, before I throw before I throw it, I'm like, wait a minute, okay, what can I use the skins for? What can I what can I use the seeds for? What can I I'm very conscious of like,
so you need chickens,
what
because
can I
when it comes
extract
right
the
down
most
to the
out of it?
end, you can feed it to the chickens.
Yeah.
After you've
right?
used
And then,
used it, then to the chickens.
exactly. And then like the little nub
Then feed your soil.
finally I've extracted as much as I can. I throw it into the yard and like, the birds will eat it. Like something, right? But no, like that's what you have to start thinking about. Like, and then what can I use for next year for my garden? So yeah, that's a big thing that's come into my mind as of late.
Yeah. No questions have come in yet. So if you guys want to keep talking about this, or I had my original question, which was, what do you see for the future of the Edmonton scene? But we can keep talking about just all this wonderful stuff. I mean, obviously you're all passionate about this.
Well, actually, I was thinking about sustainability, and I can't remember if you had mentioned it, Kate, or you did provide that in one of our questions.
It was one of the questions. It hasn't quite yet made its way in here, but yeah.
I think, you know, when I think of sustainability, we might immediately go to, okay, food miles, or okay, being thrifty, or not wasting. But also I really feel like we need to think about sustainability in terms of one, can food producers survive? And like, are they getting the money that they need, and are they able to build the infrastructure, and can they access the markets in the way they need to keep going? And also then sustainability in terms of, how will I put this? We get excited about gardening. We have a school garden gets set up, but the one passionate person, that kid graduates, and then the garden is laying there. And so I think we need to imagine how we create succession plans for community gardens, farmers markets, like ag businesses, where does our knowledge go and how can it continue if we're not building up those systems, passing on those skills? And some of those skills are organizational skills, like the city market almost died because it didn't really have a board, and the board had kind of lost the skills of operating like a board. And I'm sure community gardens struggle sometimes, right? Like there's so many ways we need to invest in people so that they can actually execute those projects and pass on that knowledge and those skills and traditions. Exactly.
People are a big part, or the major part of sustainability. So I read a statistic the other day, something like 82% of Canadian farmers are over the age of 60, something really scary. And of course, that's a lot of sort of more industrial farmers. Yes, we know the high cost of farming, but if we don't have people to work on farms, we're kind of hooped. And we don't think of that as a sexy job. So I think in many ways we have to stop thinking about the cost of food and start thinking about the value of food. Because every time we turn on the news now, and like, oh, food costs have gone up, food costs have gone up. Well, is that for a bag of chips or is that for a bag of carrots? I think they're two very, very different things. And we really have to start thinking about value, both of the people that grow it and how we eat it. And that we work within a system. Like local food is a system. So you're supporting your community, whether it's a locally owned grocery store or you're supporting a local farmer, they're supporting you too. And I think we need to really keep that top of mind. And I would hope, and I hope I'm not being a Pollyanna here, but I would hope that becomes more top of mind for all of us in the future. I hope we're raising food savvy kids. What are kids learning about food? Like 10, 11, 12-year-olds. Are they learning the importance of food? Are they learning the value of food? People say, oh, well, that beef is so expensive. I think that beef was hand raised. It didn't grow up in a feedlot. It didn't, same with pretty much all Alberta on the hoof, all of our protein on the hoof. When you think of it, pork, beef, chickens, etc. I want them to have a good life too. So I think that's part of this whole question of sustainability and what do we really want in the future.
I agree. It reminds me very much. It's a book I always basically push on anyone I can. It's a British farmer and shepherd, James Rebanks, and he's written 2 books. One was called The Shepherd's Life, and it was about sort of the year of being a shepherd. And it's really
a wonderful book.
So good. Yeah, it blew my mind when I first read it. He talks like basically the shepherding life has not changed in ever, which I didn't realize. But also he came out with a new book in the past couple of years called Pastoral Song. And that talks more about the farming side of things for his life and how he learned from his grandfather and how what he learned from his grandfather changed dramatically, during the 80s and 90s as farming changed, and how he's trying to now kind of rewild his farm and change the practices. But it's a tough go. And I will admit that book made me cry because it's just, he cares so much, but it's obviously it's a tough thing that farmers across the world are going through right now, trying to move away from this sort of industrialized and not thinking about the value of food and just thinking about the dollars. So if anyone's interested in a really good book that literally I'm getting choked up thinking about it, but James Rebanks, amazing writer, Pastoral Song and The Shepherd's Life, great books.
Really, really good.
Yeah.
And that's just it. I mean, we have to be thinking about those things because you can't expect someone to, live their whole life like a pauper because they're making food for people. That's just all wrong. And in my opinion, it's all wrong. And the whole concept of regenerative farming is really, really exciting. So Sundog is a farm I know quite well, and I've written several stories on their journey to regenerative farming, and it's so exciting what they're doing, and their vegetables just keep tasting better and better. So there's definitely something to it. It's not just some woo woo. It definitely works, and the more farmers that are doing it, I think the better off we're all going to be. It's good for the planet.
Patty, you were going to say something, yeah?
Yeah, I think hand in hand with this, as we work to value farmers or value foragers or value food that is grown sustainably, I think we just have to hit poverty head on and think about food sovereignty and the fact that, however X number of people in the country go hungry. And so I think we can't do one without the other. So we can't, you know, leave farmers to not earn what they need to earn to live, but we also can't, you know, say we have to, you know, food that's valued. It doesn't matter how you value it if you don't have money to begin with. So I do think that social change needs to happen there.
Mhm.
Um,
And some of that is skills based. I mean, knowing how to cook is a really good skill. So it means you can buy a chicken, which is less expensive than buying pieces, or you know what to do with all those beans and lentils, which are still, you know, fairly inexpensive. Knowing how to forage, like what can you get for free out there? I mean, I know it's not the total answer, but it's certainly part of the answer is building those kinds of skills for people or helping them build those skills.
excellent. Yeah, and I mean, Wendy asked a question in the chat about just how to know what weeds are safe and to eat. Sorry, not just safe, safe to eat. And Kevin was answering, but also pointed out that he does teach some of the stuff, and people can learn through various means how to do these things and how to forage and all that. Obviously, yes, there is bigger systemic problems in the world that just learning how to forage won't fix, but it is, as you say, a part that can be played in all this. Any other thoughts?
I would push back on that permaculture, regenerative ag, and native species, I think, are part of the solution to a lot of those macro problems. And for example, I agree entirely with Mary that food needs to be expensive so that restaurateurs, chefs, the farmers especially growing this stuff are paid well and can actually do that and not have to be poor. But we also have to have access to food and healthy food. And if that means that people need to be eating dandelion salads because that's free, I'm cool with that. Or and I can give just a billion examples of free food in the city. So that food access and kind of this whole conundrum, it's a really weird socioeconomic problem to solve. That's bigger than any of us in this room, but it's one of those things that if you don't pick away at it, it's not going to get better until it implodes or something.
And I don't even use the word expensive because that to me means something that's not really what
fair. I
so
accept
you can go have, you know, 10 meals of crappy fast food at $20 a time, or you can spend $200 at a decent restaurant. You know, that's a choice we make. And that's, of course, fun food. That's not food that you need because you're, you know, your family's starving. So I know I'm maybe using a bad example, but I'd like to see those cheap and expensive. I like those words to be right out of the conversation, right out of the conversation. So it's really about what do we value? How are we going to help people live? You know, how are they going to get enough to eat? How are we going to teach people or help people learn how to cook things so then they can do like Lindsay and use every single bit of that radish or whatever it is they're cooking. And yes, some dandelion salads. Oh, the only thing, make sure you pick them before you really have to pick them before the flowers come out. Otherwise, those leaves can be tough and bitter.
Okay, I've never actually tried it. I have a ton of dandelions in my yard, and so I should.
Well, get picking.
Yeah.
You can eat the flowers and you can actually eat the roots. So one of the best dandelion dishes I've ever had was an ice cream. It was like a dandelion coffee ice cream with crunchy dandelion root, candy, chunky, crunchy pieces on top. It was delicious.
Wow. Again,
the flowers are really tasty. They're really sweet and quite delicious. Like you see dogs eat them all the time.
But as you say, there's so much, again, a lot of it is just the knowledge of it. Like there's so much and there's so much out there. And part of it is just teaching people and just getting the word out there. So that's fascinating. I mean, I've learned so much already tonight, and I want to learn more. We are getting close to actually, we're 20 minutes past the hour. I haven't seen any more questions come in. I wanted to give a chance for you guys to maybe, if there's anything you wanted to mention, anything you wanted to promote, anything you want to let people know about, if you want to just kind of go around, and you know, if you have something you want to make sure people are aware of in the city and what's going on, we'd love to hear that. Any thoughts?
I want to mention one thing.
Urban Farm, yes.
Saturdays 10 to 4.
I love that, Patty. I want to mention one thing. Earlier this year, I think February or so, was the first year for the Soul soul, I think it was called the Soul Food Festival. And it was essentially a festival of Black owned businesses. And there was a lot of restaurants there. And it was phenomenal. It
Yeah.
was so cool. And I think they're going to do it every year from now on. And I keep, it'll be in the Tomato, but I'm sure it'll be lots of other places because it's really a fun thing. They had lots of, like at a place called Flava Cafe and a couple other places, a lot of island food, a lot of African food. It was so interesting and so tasty.
It is fascinating. And actually my home branch, I'm just temporarily at Strathcona. My home branch is Sprucewood, which is 115th and 95th.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that whole area for food is amazing. I miss so much of the restaurants that are around there because it is a lot of the African immigrants in their restaurants. And it's just, I love it so much. I love food.
And one more thing. I want to make a shout out for the kitchen at the Stanley Milner.
Yes,
So
I
my
had mentioned that. We
chef-
do have a kitchen and there is a learning
And it's-
component to it.
It's fantastic. And the classes, there's really interesting classes. They're all online. My friend Zosha runs it and she's of Polish descent. And to listen to her talk about food, she should be on this panel because she's amazing. And
Yeah.
what she's doing up there is really something. It's a beautiful teaching space.
It really is. And we're hoping to obviously utilize it more. It's we're still figuring out everything about how it's going to work, but it's great. I also want to mention at the Milner Library, if you haven't been down there is a seed library.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So if people are looking to plant or have seeds that they want to donate to the library, you can do that too. And so yeah, it's come and grab some seeds. So yeah, check that out too. But yeah, Lindsay, anything that you want to let people know about, make sure that it's there.
I mean, just for myself, I mean, like I said, I'm just kind of independently working now. And from that, I've learned a lot about growing my own like herbs, growing my own flowers, sprouting my own seeds. Like something I forgot to mention, I've started like lentil seeds, mung bean seeds. I sprout everything and I make salads from it now. So just taking things that are just like typically even in your cupboard and utilizing it to make a fresh salad. Take 3 days, soak them, sprout it, make a healthy salad. Just start to look into things a little bit further that are usually in your everyday life. That's kind of what I've been trying to do, and it's been working really great. So I've been really happy to have been invited on this panel, and I've learned a lot, I think, just from like Kevin, Mary, like just everybody. I like learned so much. It's been very eye-opening, and yeah, thank you very much for having me. That's about it.
It's great to be here. Is there a place where people can kind of watch what you're doing, watch this space for you and what you're up to?
I should post a little bit more on social media. I've been terrible at it, but I know it. No, I do have like my Instagram, chef, I think it's Chef Porter, and yeah, I'll start posting a little bit more. But no, if you want to hit me up, contact me. I'm doing some catering, little small independent catering here and there. So yeah, feel free to contact me, and hopefully I'll hear from you. And yeah, I'm open all summer.
Patty, you said Urban Farms. Obviously, everyone should go check that out. Saturdays 10 to 4. I think I heard you say.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Awesome.
weigh in here.
Yeah.
I've got a TV series on PBS called Wild Harvest, Les Stroud's Wild Harvest, with Survivor man Les Stroud. We did 2 seasons of that. It's also I think it's on Cottage Life Television in Canada, and may or may not. I don't think it's geo-blocked for YouTube. I think it's on YouTube as well through Les Stroud's YouTube channel. It's also on National Geographic in Asia right now, all over Asia. That one's very much like backyard foraging stuff. And then a chef handling that and making kind of really lovely food out of it. And then the one I've been working on that I produce called From the Wilds in season 10 right now, and that's all pay-per-view at fromthewild.ca. And that's very nerdy. It's very ecosystem. Like I just spent a week on a small island off the coast of BC learning how to cook with giant kelp and shore plants. So that kind of nerd. So that's From the Wild. So that's where people can watch what I do.
Wonderful. That's great. And yeah, Patty, Mary, Kevin, do you guys have social media handles people can follow you at, or?
We're at Tomato Food Drink. Sorry,
I'll put them in the
how to
comments.
do
Thank
this
you.
on my
Yeah. And I'll
phone.
make sure I'll be sending out the link to this recording to everyone who's registered, and I'll save the chat and include all the links and some of the things that people have posted. So thanks so much for that. Yeah, thank you so much for all this. I think we are pretty much getting to the end of our time. This has been absolutely fascinating. As I said, I've learned so much, and I just feel like there's so much more to learn. Thank you to Patty, Kevin, Lindsay, Mary for your time, and to all of you in the audience for joining us here tonight. I also want to thank Victoria, who's been hard at work in the background. She's the one who helped bring all this together. She is a librarian at EPL and part of the Capital City Press team. So thank you so much to you, Victoria. And thanks to all for being here, and go out and enjoy the rest of your evening. Go out and check out what Edmonton has to offer, both restaurants, and just take a walk through the river valley and see what food you can find, and just eat stuff. Apparently, I've learned.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
eat
you
it
very
all.
much.
Thank you all, and you have a good night.
Thank
right,
you.
bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much. Bye.